I guess the panel is almost here. Just missing David Nikoski and possibly David. David is on the road today, David Tawil. So he'll be maybe joining for a bit. And then tomorrow and the day after tomorrow, he will be away. So we'll continue the show without him, and then he'll join again on Monday. Can you hear me fine, gentlemen? Okay. Then let's start with the news. There's quite a few news today. Financial news. We will start with SK Hynix. So SK Hynix unveiled plans to buy back 40 trillion won, so essentially $29 billion of stock, and return more of its profit to the shareholders in an effort to calm worries about the durability of AI spending. The stock plunged and then got bought right back all the way up. Very volatile. The volatility in these memory stocks is just galactic. Down 10%, back up 10%. It's crazy, but this is the era in which we live. It also boosted its shareholder and return pledge to more than 50% of free cash flow, up from a previous target of within 50%. So, I mean, you have to remember that this stock went up by a lot. So have the other memory stocks in the last year. And they're trying to calm the market. But we have to remember also that, I mean, if I were the company, I would wait to rebuy my stock at a lower level. Now, they may have a window in which they will rebuy. They don't have to rebuy right away. So I don't have the details on the window of the repurchase. But this is going to be a factor coming in the year or two to come. Everybody's trying to calm the investors about the AI domino effect when some companies potentially lose a lot of valuation. And so this is going to be a recurring theme, I think, over the next easily year or two, depending on when we have the Anthropic and the OpenAI IPO, if we do get to there. Probably at least one of them will get to it, but we'll see. Um, the next news is that OpenAI's revenue grew much slower than Anthropic, and that matters for the IPO that we're talking about. And so I expect the Anthropic IPO to be higher valuation, but still we have some time to see when they actually do it. We'll see the news up to them. In other robotics related news, Unitree jumped 600%. So Unitree is the biggest robot maker in China. About 90% of robots currently are produced in China for humanoid robots. So they have the biggest market share. The United States is waiting for Elon to finish his super gigafactory, whatever it is, Terafab, whatever the name is, for him to produce them. So China is taking the lead there. And well, they're ahead. Now, their robot is smaller. The Unitree one is a bit smaller than a human. It's a good way to not scare people off and to be able to, to grab it and shut it off if you have something that's happening, something malfunctioning. But I think this is going to be now accelerating the competition for the Americans on that space. And we'll keep an eye on it definitely for the next few years. That's for sure. Another news is that Moderna is up plus 65% pre-market. Apparently, you all remember when the mRNA technology came out a few years ago with COVID, they said, okay, we can use it for COVID, we can use it for many viruses, we can use it to customize to cure a cancer. Well, apparently that's what they've achieved to realize. They say that an experimental mRNA-based vaccine succeeded in preventing cancer from coming back or spreading in a study of high-risk melanoma patients. That's what Moderna and its parent Merck said. Um, I have a little bit of reservations on that because we saw all the promises they made during COVID, how they twisted some numbers. I don't doubt that the technology may be able to reach there. So let's wait and see if it really did that and if they can replicate it for more cancers. If they do, it will be the game-changing technology that they used to talk about. But right now, I'm still a bit suspicious and a skeptic, I would say, of how far they can really go. But apparently, in trials, they're having some success. So I guess we'll take this as good news because we want to be able to cure cancers, obviously. So let's see. And then in other news, we have Meta. Well, anybody has any comments on that before I continue? either on SK Hynix or on this Moderna thing. We had a lot of talk about it during the pandemic already on so many spaces. I don't have anything to add beyond what I just said. Any panelists want to add something? If not, I just
I'll add something to the SK Hijinks thing. It was $29 billion, and it was only 3.3% of the float. And it doesn't sound like much, but that's 50% of their free cash flow, which they made a decision on, which is significant. And if you think about at the moment, everyone is needs capital for everything, every build out ever. They're doing the opposite. They're buying back their shares. It's interesting because it seems to me they want to keep the memory margins large by avoiding a build out, essentially.
David Tawil, welcome to your show.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Eric. Thank you for taking over. Please let me know if the audio is not good. On the SK Hynix thing, I'm just concerned around Korea. Different countries have different problems right now. Japan has its own issues with respect to yields and currency weakness. With respect to Korea, the concentration of an economy and a market that is so focused on just two companies and one single product is pretty incredible. And if I'm a leader of that government, on the one hand, I want to reap as much benefit as I can for as long as I can, for the sake of the country. At the same time, you don't want the euphoria to run away. That's why they put controls on how levered ETFs can be, single name ETFs, and so forth. I don't know how great of a look this is for a company that just raised money. It IPO'd in the United States, just a couple months ago, and now they're buying back stock after a precipitous decline in the equity. I mean, I would think that somebody from the government is definitely involved in this conversation, because of the significance of the company and the industry to the country overall. And you kind of got to let markets do what they do. You can't be there synthetically as we know in the United States, right? A Fed put is not a particularly good thing to have. If you don't need it, why access it? So I'm a little concerned. I'm not invested in Korea, but again, all of this goes around and around. On the Moderna thing, I mean, look, I'm not a healthcare guy, but it seems that the breakthrough in terms of cancer, melanoma to begin with, but maybe more broadly, could be enormous. This could be a watershed moment. I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. But the market is definitely taking it as such. The stock is currently up, I think, over 100% in the pre-market.
Thank you very much, David. Yes, that was the promise of mRNA that at the beginning of the pandemic they sold to us, and they said that it has that potential. Maybe they found a way to actually make it work. It's not an easy process, but let's see over time. I would love it if we can cure cancers with that. Oh my God, that would be so amazing. Because God knows, heart disease and cancers are the two biggest things that we face, that cost a lot to the healthcare, that are very difficult for patients, and that would be great to be able to cure. Lumi, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I wanted to just add to David's point. Thank you. About the South Korean stock exchange being halted. I sent this to David this morning, but after 5 minutes of trading, it was halted, because of an 8% drop. And this is the kind of movements which David's been talking about, because that is really kind of dangerous, and that's why I think he might be onto something. Because the recent IPO, I mean, it was very, very recent. And if you think about why you would do this to a capital structure, it's to try and support prices, right? Because if you were going to use that money to build out memory and like at least meet the demand of the memory cycle, then they would have built something in America, right? Which they are actually doing, but the point is that it gets real interesting when it's 50% of their free cash flow, because this is actually, I think David's onto something. I really do. I think that's a great observation.
Thank you very much, Lumi. Carlo, your hand is up.
Good morning, all. Another big announcement that we need to most definitely touch on this morning is the SEC announcing a proposed safe harbor for crypto assets. This development is largely, I think, in response to the failure of the Clarity Act and the fact that it's been put off until the return of the Senate on the recess. But even the SEC is stressing that while these proposed regulations, which are not final, which will vastly simplify the way that a token ICO can be launched without having to go through the burden of complying with SEC standards, will most definitely change the way the sector approaches these. It relaxes and creates a viable pathway for token offerings to be launched and to raise funds on tokens without the burden of having to qualify under previously completely non-conforming SEC standards from the Securities Act. So I've pinned an article that kind of summarizes it, but I think it's an important development. Reminder, this is a proposed regulation. It's not final. And of course, like everything else that comes out of the regulatory bodies, it can change when those bodies change in power structure. And of course, Congress can change this as well with the passage of law, which is why everyone involved still stresses that the Clarity Act is the best path. But this is a huge step forward. Thank you all.
Thank you very much, Carlo. I see from the audience is one of our listeners, which is asking about the Trump tariffs, because another news, Trump decided to postpone the tariffs on Canada, which were due for today, I think, by 3 days because the negotiations are succeeding, it seems, and they have a few details to finalize. I'm still worried because these hardest to finalize details are usually the issues that have been there for a long time, such as dairy, the softwood, and whatnot. Will they be able to reach an agreement or not? It remains to be seen over the next few days. It's a good news, the fact that they're talking enough that he feels like, okay, I'm give them a few more days and to get a deal. But I'm not totally taking his word for it yet, because I know that they had quite a few issues, and but the Canadian economy is indeed suffering a lot, so it is also in Canada's interest to get some deal. I will say something on that. As a French Canadian, the Canadians are afraid that, okay, we're going to get some of these products, agricultural products from the United States. I have no problem as long as you label it from the US. Say just this is milk from the US and sell it. Why not? Then I can decide if I'm going to buy it or not. And if I don't trust it and I trust my milk more because of the additives and this and that and how it's done, then I'll just buy my own food made locally. That's the kind of deal that I would make with the US, so that there's less of a friction there. But you do label it so that the consumer knows and can freely choose. Now the government is worried, mistaken, and we cannot manage the supply, which is what they're doing in the dairy sector. A few key sectors of agriculture, the government had decided long ago to do that for various reasons, and also by managing the supply. But they also sometimes support the supply, so the government makes sure that people have that which was necessary for the population. So there's different ways of looking at it. Um, and also the food standards are different. The Canadian food standards are bad compared to France, really bad, but the Americans are worse. So it's all relative. So as long as you label it, I'm okay with it. That's my own personal perspective on that. I don't know if you guys have any other take, but this is how I look at it, because I'm like, you got to solve this trade war, and if this is what it will take. And I think they have some alcohol, yeah, because you see in Canada we put extra taxes on alcohol, significant ones, and Trump is not too happy about that, on top of some tariffs. So I think they're going to debate this back and forth. But all the alcohol except the beers, they have a smaller percentage of tax, whatever, and they're at the supermarket. But all the wines, the champagnes, and all the whatever sophisticated alcohols, they get sold with a big hefty tax, which the consumers pays to finance the state. So they have the cigarette tobacco taxes, they have the alcohol taxes, they have the oil taxes, yeah, the gasoline taxes, which are quite high here in Canada. They're higher in France. In France, they don't have tax on alcohol, but they have tax on gasoline, which are higher to compensate. Here we have kind of both taxes, and that is an irritant for Donald Trump. for the costs, and there was a boycott. You have to remember that Canada boycotted American products, including those alcohols. So he wants to have a deal so that they can restart again the distribution of that people will be willing to buy if they have a deal. So let's see what happens. I don't drink alcohol, so it's not my specialty. I cannot say much more on it. But I can definitely confirm that we have a lot of taxes across the board for all these products. Okay, next news item. Let me just catch up. Just a second, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, Lazy Boy shares slumped 19% in pre-market trading after the furniture maker swung to a loss in its fiscal first quarter from an unexpected decline in sales. So is it that we're less lazy in our chair, or we buy cheaper ones from made elsewhere and different styles? I don't know. I know that I buy different styles of zero gravity chairs from different vendors rather than the full sophisticated Lady Boy. That's my personal thing. But, this is part of the news. We have Meta. Okay, so Meta is having its biggest legal challenge in California, of course, as usual, where 29 states are joining the lawsuit, alleging harm to young users. So that's important because we do see an addiction to social media in the youth. It is causing harm in many countries in the world. Some countries are banning it, some countries are not banning it, but they go to lawsuit instead. So this is something that we're going to have to watch closely. Uh, uh, Essentially, they say that it's Meta violated the state consumer protection laws and the federal Children's Online Privacy Protection Act of 1998 by knowingly making its platforms addictive. So, Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp. Let's see what happens with that. We remember that Microsoft had a big antitrust legislation for years and years. This one, because it concerns children, I think would be a bit more concerning to the authorities, because just about every one of them must have children and must see the effect at home directly on their children's development. So I think this is going to be something that we have to watch closely. It will have a full effect, of course, on TikTok, on just about every social media platform out there, not only on Meta, but this current lawsuit is on Meta. Kalshi is preparing to offer traders the chance to take leveraged long or short positions on the stock indexes, asking regulators at the Commodity Futures Trading Commission for approval to offer perpetual futures tied to equity indexes and separately to copper prices. So essentially, they're becoming like the what is the name of that exchange where you have all the futures? I forget. Is it the COMEX or something? And they want to be essentially the same that we have in financial markets, replicated on Kalshi. David, any comment?
Yeah. So on the Meta, look, there are people saying that this is Meta's big tobacco moment. This is not like the civil cases that we've had until now by private plaintiffs. These are the states, and the magnitude is over $1 trillion. And this is real. Not to say that I know which way this is going to go, but the state's attorneys general that are pursuing this are going to pursue this. They have deepest of pockets to pursue it. I think strategically, and maybe Carlo could comment on this, and I wish Eladio was here for this because this is also potentially a partisan issue, even though it shouldn't be. Mental health, I think, should be bipartisan. Not to say that I have, an opinion on whether Meta is culpable or not, but the the state's attorney general have now had the benefit of watching trials for private plaintiffs and watch those private plaintiffs win. So there is a bit of a playbook here that they can go ahead and follow, a bit of groundwork already laid, and they will pick up on that along with strategies used by states attorneys general for other mass torts of other kind in the history of mass tort activity. And so for that reason, I am thinking it is a quite big issue that we need to watch out for.
It is
Thank you, David.
definitely it's definitely a conflict of laws set up here between the supremacy of the federal government to regulate and the states' rights to control what happens within their jurisdictions. And it's also a very, very high bar to prove this type of conduct. To connect the addictive nature of social media to the mental health crisis is not going to be the easiest connection to make beyond the standard necessary in court to prove and prevail. So this will be a challenging lawsuit, I think, David.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, with respect to Carlos' point, he's absolutely right. And just like in the case of big tobacco, essentially somebody's going to have to find a smoking gun that says, we know that this is addictive. We know that it is harmful. And yet we're going to continue to push this. And that's what happened in the case of big tobacco or in the case of asbestos. And we'll see if that happens here.
Paul, you have your hand up?
Yeah, in the case of big tobacco, I worked on some security. I'm going to tie this into private credit. To do the weave here. I worked on some securitizations related to big tobacco back in 2001, and it was due to the settlements per state. So some states did a settlement that was a muni bond. Some states did settlements that were actually an ABS securitization, and anything that would be done, settled with any state. Obviously, each state. Some states hold out. Some states they had a master settlement for tobacco, but not. It wasn't all the states. It was like 45 of them, and a few held out to do their own settlements. But ultimately, it's done as a structured settlement. So this was payments over to the state over many years. And some did them as muni bonds because there was a tax benefit and a lower interest rate. Some did them as these securitization, and they got ratings, they were sold to insurance companies and other related companies. So it's pretty interesting. This would be, I'd say it would be way bigger than the tobacco settlement. I forget how big the tobacco settlement was. It was under $1 trillion. That was 2001. So we'll see where that comes from. But in the tobacco settlement, if you remember the movie The Insider with Russell Crowe, that's one thing that we
I lost Paul.
some people to close a gift to people. Oh,
okay. I hear you again.
no problem.
Paul, did you finish or are you still there? I can't hear you.
Oh, yeah. No, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you.
1, 2. Yeah. In the movie The Insider with Russell Crowe, they had the states had a insider that was providing like detailed testimony that was going to basically show that they intentionally made or allegedly made cigarettes addictive. Here, I don't know. I remember there was an insider back in 2017 from Facebook, but that's the kind of like real detail they need to like get this kind of settlement, I would think.
Thank you very much.
They
Lumi, go ahead.
have an insider. They have an insider. He testified already, or started to testify already, and it's an engineer. So it's a meta engineer. His name is available online if you want to look into it. But he already started his testimony, and that I think is where it gets kind of like interesting, because you just said they need people to come forward. They literally have the people, but this is about the infinite scroll. Infinite scroll is one of the key points of this whole like thing. And to be honest, even X has a thing which has become quite infinite, which is you can go through the videos infinitely now, whereas before they used to limit it. And I highly recommend, if Elon is listening, he should just change that feature again and limit it to like 100 videos or whatever, and just avoid any kind of like repercussions which are happening, because it's kind of like really easy to avoid. So there was that one issue. The other issue, which is in the crosshairs, is using children's data without the permission of their guardian, it seems. And that also is kind of like not an X issue, because on X, most of the users are over the age of 18, if not like it's a large percentage, and because of that, it's not a problem on here. So this is something where it could be quite devastating for Meta. I mean, David did say it's like 1.4 trillion to 200 billion dollars they're looking for damages. It's kind of crazy. So we're gonna find out.
Thank you, Lumi. I want to also bring the next news. A record 29% of all cars sold around the world this year are expected to be powered by electricity, including full battery powered models and plug-in hybrids, according to a recent report from the International Energy Agency. In 2020, it was 4%. Now, it doesn't say here which percentage are plug-in versus full battery, but I love the plugins personally. Let's see where it goes. It depends on the infrastructure of the country as well. David, go ahead. I see your hand up.
Yeah, no, this is just, I think, important to highlight the reaction to the Iran war. And although, we here in the United States, most people can handle the price rise in gasoline and probably won't change their buying habits all that radically. Elsewhere in the world, as we've talked about, price of gasoline on a percentage basis, terms of rise before and during the conflict, has been greater than in the United States, and pushing people to more electrification. And I guess as long as the war continues to go on and prices don't come down meaningfully, this trend will continue. And it's a big number. And this is, to go back to the finance of this, this is going, this is whiplashing the automobile makers. I can't imagine being an automobile maker trying to figure this out. I know Anas has told us, and I generally agree, that plug-in hybrids are the answer no matter what. It is the way forward. It's a win-win as opposed to a lose-lose. But I think a lot of brands, as we've spoken about, the European brands have gotten electrification really, really wrong. And now all of a sudden, because of the conflict, the pendulum's swinging the other way. In a business that's hard enough in terms of planning years and years in advance, this type of swing is just, it makes their lives impossible. They're probably dizzy at this point.
Yeah, I don't know why a lot of countries. I mean, it's so obvious that when you have the plug-in hybrid is the best of both worlds. You have a small battery, but for most people, when you just go to work and come back for the day, it's enough, right? If you live within an urban area, so that was a no-brainer. That's why Toyota had done their RAV4, their top model was a plug-in hybrid, and it was always sold out, even in 2020. So for 6 years, it was always sold out, because it was very popular. That's what people got attracted to the most, getting the most options. I see two hands up, Anas, and I think
May
Duncan.
I just want to comment on the hybrid, and then I can talk about the energy stuff later on toward the
Okay,
end.
sure.
It's been very clear since 2017 that electric vehicles have a serious problem. And we do have three major issues need to be resolved, and they have not been resolved until today completely. The first one is financial. When you look at the states that imposed very high taxes on gasoline and diesel in the United States, or you look at Europe, when you look at Europe, taxes on gasoline and diesel and petroleum products exceed 500 billion a year. If they electrify, how they are going to compensate for that? We know those politicians, especially the socialist ones, are after that money. So how they are going to compensate, and that's where the issue is. So we predicted since 2017 that there will be a time when the subsidies are going to stop and taxes will be imposed. And now we are seeing a movement toward per mile tax, regardless of what the engine is, whatever the motor is, etc. So the first issue is financial. And that's a big issue. When you go for hybrid, basically, you still have the same system. You don't have to change the legal system. You don't have to meet and impose new taxes or registration fees or anything else. The second one is an environmental issue. If we go with the forecast of the IEA, and you are looking at hundreds of millions of EVs, there will be a time when we have those billions with B, billions of batteries. And those batteries, by the way, are huge, they are big, of complete toxins, basically, we need to get rid of. And until now, we don't have a system basically to manage how to get rid of them. We heard about recycling, etc., but all those recycling will not work without subsidies, and even that does not get rid of the problem. So, for those who are familiar with the nuclear waste, are we going to end up with another Yucca Mountain? Because we are going to have billions of those. So, we have this environmental issue with the battery. And the most important one, related to the current war, related to everything related to whatever going on with China, trade wars, etc., which is national security. China controls most of the mining of the minerals that are needed for the batteries, and China controls 80 to 85% of the processing of those minerals. So you have those three issues. You have the financial issue, the environmental issue, and the national security issue. And that's why it is common sense that there will be a limit to electric vehicles, where whatever that limit is. So we are not denying that they will expand, but there will be a limit as a result. And notice that most of the increase in the world and most electric vehicles on the road today are in China. And the question is why? This is a national security issue. This has nothing to do with the climate change. And this is one of the, I don't want to say kind of foul language here, but we have some people in Europe and Canada who are supposed to be the capitalists and the Westerners who are bragging about EVs in China. It just does not make sense. Once they realize why China is doing this, China basically is trying to enhance its national security by reducing dependence on energy imports, or at least the seaborne energy imports. And therefore, they are enhancing their power. So for those in Canada and Europe who are bragging, and some people on the left side here in the United States are bragging about China, you are literally kind of cheating your own country. Back to you.
Thank you very much, Anas. Brendan, did you have a comment as well?
Yeah, I had comments on something else. So if you were keep going, go ahead.
Okay, but let me just finish on this one. For those who don't know in the audience, in Europe, in France, for example, the 1 gallon of oil, because 1 liter is like €2, and €2 means like $10 to $12 per gallon. $12 per gallon for fuel. So it costs a lot, and that's why they have all the taxes now. That the government is super happy because it's a percentage value of what you pay for the oil. So when the oil price goes up, the gasoline price goes up. Well, you get more taxes. So the government is very happy about that. And as Anas will said, if they don't get those taxes because people go to electrical vehicles, they will have another form of tax just to be able to balance the budget. Well, the budgets are not balanced, but just to be able to compensate, if I can say that way. We still have a lot of budget issues across the Western world where we're printing too much money. The governments are not able to balance their budget at all, and I think we all agree. We discussed it so many times. I don't think we're going to be balanced anytime soon. They're just printing more and more and more, which is why we always recommend to have those asset classes which can guard against inflation. Okay, back to Brandon. Go ahead.
Yeah, just real quick, you just made me think about that Robert Pattinson meme when it comes to Europe. Get these beggars out of here. Which is it just made me think about that. But anyways, so to go back, I want to step back to the meta thing, and my personal opinion, I think this is ridiculous. The entire trial. Parents got to parent their children. I think that like I don't know where we have gone as a society that's just out of the question now. Like if you don't want your children on social media watching more than 100 videos a day, then don't allow them to do that. It should be that simple.
like of course Meta is going to make people want to be on their product more. That just increases their business. That's the entire point of a business is, I want people to use my product more. And so that's the game. For politicians to have to step in place of the parents, I think it's silly, but that's just where the times are, I guess. And then the other story I wanted to talk about are these data centers. David and I discussed it a little bit yesterday, but I think it's just an important topic to speak on. Pennsylvania, and I say it because Pennsylvania, where I'm from, just our governor Shapiro just signed not really a moratorium on data centers, but kind of putting a pause and a halt on all of them, and so a ton of restrictions around them. And I think it's become political theater, I guess, is the best way to put this. And I say that because just months ago, he celebrated bringing an Amazon data center here. Hold on. And what I think is just crazy about it is his opponent in the upcoming elections had said, or Republican opponent is against data centers. And it's because a lot of these people, their constituents, are against data centers. There's no actual real data behind it, but it's just people are against it for a plethora of reasons. They hear these stories on electricity usage or water usage. They hear the stories on AI in general. It's just become this political theater, and I believe that a lot of this is CCP propaganda that has been put out there because if you look at the actual stats behind it, and I use the water one as an example, we have many beautiful golf courses here in Pennsylvania, and those golf courses use way more water than a single data center does. And so that's silly. Again, we've talked about that these data centers bring high paying jobs to the area. Some of those jobs may be temporary jobs, such as the construction of the data center, but then there's the maintenance of the data center, which create long term jobs. These data centers do not just sit there, it's not just set it and forget it. They actually do need maintained, and so those are other jobs. And so it's just kind of a silly thing. But to be honest, I don't even place the blame on the politicians. The politicians are going to do what they do. They hear hot button issues that they get some polling from their constituents, and instead of going out and talking with their constituents and having real conversations, roundtables, etc., they just take those pollings as the God honest truth, as if it's straight from the Bible, and then decide that that's what they're going to do and that's what they're going to talk about. But I really place the blame on the data center companies, on the AI, the frontier AI labs themselves as well. And I've said this many times. I've actually made some posts about it. Maybe I'll pen one up here, that these companies should be hiring people to be out in the communities to talk with the communities. Because what I've found, at least in my 36 years, almost 37 years of life, is that people just want to be heard, right? They don't want to be talked at, they want to be talked with. And so if these AI companies, the frontier labs, were sending out people into communities, actually going to the town halls and having these hearing the concerns of people, and then taking those concerns and having conversations, not just saying you're wrong, but actually listening to the concerns and then, educating them maybe and saying like, hey, we can help get you these jobs. We're going to train you for these jobs. We're going to create job training programs, right? We've seen this happen with plumber unions. We've seen this happen with, electricians. We have some great programs here, but like nobody's actually going out and talking with the communities about this from the frontier labs. And I think that that's a big miss on their part. I've actually reached out to some of the, well, I'll say both of the big labs, just friends that I've had, that work there or whatever, and said, why aren't you all doing this? And the responses are various across the board. I won't get too far into that, but I think it's super silly. and we're now starting to see the the deleterious effects of that. It's the now the moratoriums are happening. We will fall behind, and there will be less jobs. I mean, if the biggest thing, like, to me, the biggest thing a politician, especially a governor, should be doing, or the mayors, is creating jobs and prosperity and opportunities for their communities, and just putting a flat out a moratorium on this, or what is essentially a moratorium, is the silliest thing that I've seen them do. So that's the other story I wanted to talk about this morning. Oh, and then one final point, to talk about the OpenAI revenue, and that piece from the Wall Street Journal came out. That's another silly one. It doesn't even make sense. They're talking about Q2 revenue. Well, guess what happened right after Q2, when in July, which is this beginning of Q3. That's when the Soul family was launched. That's when the Codex and the ChatGPT app kind of merged, desktop, et cetera, where they had a huge explosion of growth. And so, just to talk about those Q2 numbers, yeah, maybe they're important, whatever. It's not looking at the full picture and the forward picture of it all. And so, that to me, it just felt like they wanted to talk about ChatGPT, or they wanted to talk about OpenAI in a negative light for whatever reason. I don't know. They've had many of those articles on OpenAI and Sam Altman and in general. So it was just a silly thing. But if you actually look at the numbers, look at the growth, and then I've said this a million times on this show, how OpenAI reports revenue versus how Anthropic reports revenue. And there's a pretty vast difference there. It's not to take anything away from Anthropic. Again, fantastic company, growing at tremendous rates, but that's, we have to really look into the numbers there.
Thank you, Brandon. I see David, Paul, I see Anas as well. So, David, you want to continue on the same
You can
subject,
delay
or?
me after them.
Okay. David, go ahead.
Okay, I just I want to follow up on Brandon, and not that this is um, relates particularly to investing, but you know, broadly, people need to know that the popular press, financial and otherwise, has picked up on this David and Goliath story, essentially, of people, landowners, towns, especially very rural towns, versus AI data center builders, and it's getting, it is partisan, or political. And by the way, I commend Brandon for not holding the politicians, responsible for what they're doing. Yes, they have no choice; they're going to do it. But Meta is flooding TV and podcast with ads of local benefits of data centers. Microsoft has been foregoing tax breaks to respond to community backlash, vowing that facilities won't drive up consumer prices. OpenAI is courting residents in and around Georgia, because of its $30 billion Georgia data center, pledging to conserve water and cover its own power infrastructure costs. Everyone from 60 Minutes to, lots of local papers, and national radio shows are covering this. And, there are a lot of data centers going up, but you can imagine the biggest of them and most of them are going up in very rural areas. I think there was an article the other day about how a farmer and her daughter passed up $26 million to sell because they just don't, even though they could use the money, and even though this will probably set them off to retirement, they don't want to sell it out to data centers. And I think we're going to hear more and more of this. At the end of the day, these data centers are going to get built somewhere. I think that's really important to know. Someone's going to cave for the right price. And, to Brandon's point, maybe a lot of the fear mongering is unwarranted, unfounded, unsubstantiated. But these data centers are going to get built. And if they're going to get built, as long as they're not going to really cause incredible harm to residents, there's no reason that cities should not be the beneficiaries of this. I really think, the polarizing reaction, I think is totally wrong. But just letting you know, this is a very serious subject. I just live in an urban center, so there is no data center going up near me. But in a lot of rural spots, this is a very serious matter that I think people are getting carried away with.
Thank you, David. Just before I give you the mic, Paul, I just want to add that I don't know about the individual capabilities in terms of energy and water of every state in the US, so I can't comment. But in Quebec, we do have enough for quite a few data centers. Paul, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm on the other side of the Delaware River. I'm from Brandon, and so we saw this playbook for fracking wells in Pennsylvania versus New York. If you spent any time in Northeast Pennsylvania I did in the 80s, and it's all the water in all the houses pretty much tasted like sulfur, smelled like sulfur. There was gas in the water way before there was any fracking wells. But it became a meme of people lighting their their faucet on fire with gas coming out. And I'm sure there were some places where that was caused by fracking wells, but everyone, knew that the issue was already happening way before fracking was put in place in Pennsylvania. New York kind of looked at, there was one movie that came out that kind of focused on it, and they banned fracking wells. So if you look at, the average, kind of income of a person that's in Elmira, New York versus an average income of someone that's in, I'm trying to think, Clarkson, I think, I forgot the name of the town, Clarksville or Clarkson Point, in Pennsylvania. It's a huge difference in the economic, ability, about value of a person in one of these places is very different because of, them just going with this, maybe propaganda focused change that, Governor Cuomo, made this blanket change in New York State. The HOCO has maintained it, and it hasn't really improved New York at all. It's just kind of made those people that live in those areas living in kind of worse economic issues. They've done now the same data centers in New York. Basically a moratorium on any new construction. Given if it doesn't meet certain requirements or not at all. And I think that's kind of it's making New York State uneconomic, and I think that's going to be an issue going forward. That a lot of these, I'm sure, there are issues with data centers. I saw there was some issue with I think a metadata center that one of their contractors spilled something in the water, the groundwater, and it caused issues. And those things are going to happen, but not doing anything is going to be, it doesn't help anyone. And I think that's what some of these states, you're just going to, make it more, I think we talked about it a few days ago. It just chooses which states are going to be open for business and which states are just going to fall behind. And that's the great thing about the US, that you can choose where to live and you can move states. You can kind of talk to your governor and see what going to happen. But that's something I think that New York is really going to fall behind in this place, is because, they have these issues. And even there are some necessary data centers just for, certain, financial companies and things like that have their internal data centers, and they're going to actually see some impact from this as well. So it's not something where you can just put this blanket change around AI data centers and just try to push everything else out. But I think that's what we're seeing now, and so I think you'll see more opportunities in Pennsylvania than New York in the coming years.
Thank you, Paul. Before I go to David and Lumi, I just want to add something here. With the advent of home AI, we may need a bit less data center than expected. I will talk about it more tomorrow because I will develop it more. I don't want to take too much time today on that, but I just want to mention that home AI is going to be a big thing. and bigger than some might have expected. Okay, David and Lumi.
Oh yeah, I just wanted to acknowledge that Sridhar Natarajan is in the audience today. He's the chief Wall Street correspondent for Bloomberg. Great guy. If he can get up on stage, that would be great. But go ahead, pass it over to Lumi.
I was just going to be real quick with some breaking news. There is a new partnership deal with equity with Marvel and Google to develop silicon again. Just breaking last 11, 12 minutes. This is huge. Marvel's already trading up like 12% on the day, investing into basically memory and various other chips. It looks like there's just no end to the amount of money being spent at this. I'm not gonna lie. I'm looking at this right now, and it's impressive.
Thank you, Lumi. The person that David was talking about, please send a request so I can see you and bring you up on stage if you would like to. I do not see any other hands up, which means it's time for the energy segment of Anas.
Good.
Oh, wait, Ravi. Ravi, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, just a quick question. I think on the data center, you know that I work on air water technology, and we are doing a use case. I can't reveal where we're actually looking at air water generation to really look at minimizing the impact on groundwater. And I think there are a lot of breakthrough technologies out there which will actually address this pain point for data center. It's really an issue of cooling and also water optimization. So I think it's been blown out of proportion. There is a technological solution, and I think we can easily crack it. And we're doing something pretty exciting in one part of India. So I'll probably give you more updates once it's done. So definitely, it's out of proportion. And I think overall, the groundwater, the way we know it, the way we drink water, is going to totally change because the air water generation is going to change the way we drink water. And we already have our machines in West Virginia, and Florida, in Texas. It's totally changed the whole old plumbing system, aging infrastructure, plumbing infrastructure, because you're just drawing water from air using the condensation desiccation. And the Nobel Peace Prize, which went this year, and that's the MOF technology. So we're kind of working on some very interesting breakthroughs through our R&D work.
Thank you very much. Looking forward to see the results. Anas, it is your turn. Anas, go ahead.
Good morning again. This rotten egg smell that you guys talked about comes from, or that comes with water in some areas, is common worldwide, not only in the oil and gas areas, but also in coal-rich areas. And what happens is the sulfate minerals basically dissolve into the groundwater, and then bacteria convert that to sulfur in the absence of oxygen. And that movie, The Gasland, you guys talked about, and the segment of, or that little clip about the faucet being on fire. This, of course, this went to court, by the way, and it has been proven beyond doubt that came from coal bed methane and has nothing to do with shale. It came from coal. Anyway, oil prices increased this morning by more than 1%. Prices of Brent reached $92, but now they are declining and they are going toward 90. So they are in the red right now. Reuters reported today, that India's crude oil imports in July, last month, rose more than 9% relative to June. On annual basis, crude oil imports were up 13%. Why I'm mentioning this news? Because you guys heard this on this show 3 weeks ago. So spread the word. You hear things on AI, tech stocks, real estate, other things, energy on this show before mainstream media and before bank reports. Looking at EU, gas prices, natural gas prices are going through the roof. They are already up by 50%. And Europe basically is suffering big time right now, simply because they don't have enough energy sources and they need to refill the gas storage before the winter and the level of storage right now is at the bottom of the 5-year range. Speaking of the EU, and for those who deny the decline in oil demand, this is for you. Again, this was released today. France, decline in road fuel deliveries in July 2026. We're talking about petroleum products like diesel and gasoline, fell 2.4% year over year. So for those who are declining, I already showed you the decline in Asia a couple of days ago. Now it is in Europe. You can see the numbers. We have a major decline in oil demand. And if you think that you are not going to see a decline in oil demand after all this chaos, then probably you need to go back to Econ 101 and study it again. And in Mexico, in the northern states, in Mexico, gasoline and diesel sales declined by 13%. 13%. So we are seeing this in the Americas too. Here in the United States, demand for gasoline in particular is declining. In diesel, I don't know what's going to happen. Diesel, as you know, I explained it yesterday. I think the diesel crisis is global and there is no solution for it right now. Bloomberg a couple of days ago told us that North American oil is replacing Middle Eastern oil. Let me repeat that again. Bloomberg told us a couple of days ago that North American oil, not North American, that's my mistake. America's oil, so that's North America and South America, is replacing Middle Eastern oil. In recent weeks, especially in the last 4 weeks, supply from the Americas, that's North America and South America, is lower than pre-Hormuz crisis. So how is it replacing Middle Eastern oil if it is lower than the pre-Hormuz crisis? You know, it's just lovely when you look at the numbers. Bloomberg, again, published a long report saying that Diamondback Energy, which is one of the largest shale producers in Texas, generated more free cash flow last quarter, that's the second quarter, than Amazon, Meta, and Alphabet combined. And in that article, basically, they are highlighting how disciplined U.S. shale producers have become and what Amazon, Meta, and Alphabet basically can learn from Diamondback. This is an outrageous comparison. This is ignorance and idiocy combined, unless this is part of a climate change agenda, which means that you combine several articles, you put them together, and you can see where the agenda is. And the agenda, basically, if there is an agenda, it's about, oh, you guys are expanding AI and you are using a lot of natural gas, and natural gas is fossil fuel, and fossil fuel basically is producing more CO2, and therefore we have to cut it. And if shale companies are cutting, then you should cut. And again, regarding this comparison, the combined capitalization of those three companies is 150 times Diamondback capitalization. And Diamondback Energy generated that much cash flow because of a global crisis that drove up oil and gas prices at a time when big tech companies are investing heavily in AI and data centers for the next 3 decades. You cannot make that comparison. So if they are trying to say, well, it's about capital discipline, well, we will not know whether big tech is right or wrong until years from now. And I know you guys talked about those investments for the last few months. And comparing 1 quarter financial results of an oil company during major shortages to big tech long-term investment plans Complete nonsense. Now, the Iraqi parliament speaker asked the Iranian counterpart for special status on Hormuz oil exports, which means that they want the Iraqi oil to flow out of Hormuz and the Iranians are preventing them. And that's what's being reported in the media. But really, the serious question is, we know that the Iraqi government has been a puppet of the IRGC in Iran. This been all along since the United States left Iraq. So why Iran is punishing the Iraqis and Iraq? The largest loser in the world from the Hormuz crisis is Iraq. The Iraqi government does not have even enough money to spend on wages for government employees. They are on the verge of bankruptcy. Why? And why the United States is doing nothing about it? And one of the ironies, for those who do not know, every single penny from Iraqi oil sales goes to banks in New York before it reaches Iraq. So the question is, why the IRGC is doing this and why the Trump administration is doing nothing about it? The final point is regarding LNG. This was a big surprise that Australia's LNG exports in July are near record high. But for the month of July, which means that if you look only at exports in July every year, July over July over July over the years, it was record high. Yesterday, we published a report on this, and the reason why we're interested in it, because US exports to Asia, LNG exports to Asia basically declined significantly. And we're trying to find out why. And there are several reasons. One of them is the increase in Australian exports, because if you look at the shipping cost, it's cheaper to get it from Australia than the United States. Back to you.
Thank you very much, Anas, for that. The two Davids, so David Tawil and then David Nikoski.
One of the breaking news macro headlines this morning is regarding the Treasury's involvement in the long end of the curve and essentially yield curve control. The Treasury is going to increase the size to double from 2 billion to 4 billion of its buying back of longer dated, treasuries in every operational period. This goes to Carlo's points about running this market hot. The Treasury is trying to get involved very heavily now in yield curve control, essentially telling the market, don't get away from us on yields. Whether this will have a material effect the longer term, we'll have to wait and see. Remember, this is what the US is doing. Other countries don't have the same capability. At the same time, that the Treasury is doing this, foreign investors are selling Treasuries at a record pace. And at the same time as all this is going on, the Fed has just announced that it's going to get more involved in the Japanese stability of currency. There is a lot of activity going on here by our Treasury and by our Fed that we need to watch. I wish Andy Kaufman was here this morning. Joe Carlaseri, I see you're in the audience. If you want to jump in on this and you have the ability to get on stage, please do. But I'll go ahead and turn it over to Dave McCoskey.
Go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, it's exactly what I was going to discuss, the yield curve control. Despite other other countries not having the means to do this, all of their treasury debt is priced to US Treasury. So, gold is ripping, the dollar is breaking, silver is ripping, the market futures obviously popped up, interest rate sensitive areas, be it even utilities, the banks, that type of thing, the housing, you're going to get a big bump up today. But I wouldn't underestimate, the emerging countries where their yields, especially in areas like Brazil, are extremely high. And if you're pricing their debt relative to US debt and we're seeing the long end come down, that's going to be a monster catalyst for those names. So, again, they might not have the means to do it, but if we do it and you price their debt off of US in terms of spreads, that's going to have huge consequences. So, yep, great. That's exactly what I was going to come up for, David, before you mentioned it. So, thanks.
Okay, thank you very much, David. Did we get Joe on the space? I don't think so. Any other comments, gentlemen, before we finish the space for today? If not, then I'm going to close the space for today. I'm not going to go into AI today because I will develop it more, so it'll take some time. So I'll do it tomorrow, and we have ample time
Hey,
anyway.
Eric, real quick.
Mhm.
I don't know if Carlo wanted to plug. He's got a great interview coming up in like an hour. I don't know if he wanted to speak on that real quick.
Yeah, thank you, Brandon. I'm going to be on with Farouk and Tyler on the FOMO Hour, which is affiliated with Decrypt. And I'll be talking about the recent safe harbor proposal from the SEC. So feel free to join. The FOMO Hour is on X, and they go live at about 9 a.m. Eastern. Thank you.
Thank you very
10 a.m.
much.
Eastern.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Because somebody tried to speak in the middle. I don't know if. No? All right. Gentlemen, thank you very much for the space today. Thank you to the audience for attending our shows every day. Please tell your friends and family about it. As Anas intelligently said, we are ahead of many things on this show, from energy to AI to other things. Everybody has their specialty. And we try to discuss them ahead of time because it's important to be ahead of the news and to also know when the news are not correct or twisted, so that we have the reality of what's happening for our lives. Eladio, thank you for coming, but we're closing. We'll see you again tomorrow morning, my friend. Welcome to the space. Adios, amigos. See you, everybody.